Hi, everyone. This is Robin Kinney, and we are getting ready for our I Have a Podcast Now What series. This is a 4-part series, so I'm going to give everyone some time to get settled and to come on into this live stream. We're streaming live on the Motor City Woman Facebook page as well as our YouTube channel. Feel free to leave comments. I'll be able to see all the comments as we go along here. So I'm going to give a few more minutes. Hi, Larry. I'm so glad you were able to join me. I'm so excited. How are you? It's going to wait a few more minutes. I'm just checking the stream, make sure we are all set here. Let's see, go to the Motor City Woman page. We're also streaming on our YouTube channel, which is just simply Motor City Woman. And I want to make sure as many people as possible get access to this. All righty, so I got that going. Got it? Okay. Yay, I'm so happy to be here. I'm good. I'm going to wait a few more minutes to start our I Have a Podcast Now What series. I found over these past 4 or 5 months that a ton more people are launching podcasts, which is awesome. But what about those people who they launched already and they maybe have a few episodes and now it's like, okay, so do I just keep podcasting? What do I do now? How do I really leverage the power of podcasting? And that is what this 4-part series is all about. Today is going to be the first one. It's probably going to be about 30, 40 minutes, depending on how many questions that we have. But it's going to be every Tuesday at noon Eastern Standard Time, right here on the Motor City Woman Facebook page, as well as our YouTube channel for the next 3 Tuesdays. So we have the 1st, you have the 8th, you have the 15th, and you have the 22nd. Those are the Tuesdays that we will be live and sharing as much information as I can to get you from where you are to where you want to be. And that's what this is all about. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start and I'm going to share my screen here so we can get started because I'm really excited to share. I love sharing. I love educating. I love everything that has to do with podcasting. So let me see here. Here we go. All right. Okay. So I'm just going to make sure that I can see this on our. Okay, I'm just checking to make sure. Okay. So everyone can still see me. Everyone can see my screen. I have a podcast now. What? Perfect. Okay. Let's do this. I'm going to keep these comments up on my phone just so I can make sure I don't miss anything. Okay. So why I started this series. I started this series because I saw so many people launching podcasts, and there are a ton of resources for people who either want to start a podcast or they're just getting started. But what about those people who you've already started and you're at a fork in the road? Do you just keep creating podcast episodes with no end in sight? Or do you stop? And what a term that we call pod fading, where you just fade into the background. I don't want that to happen to you. I think that everyone's voice is important, especially right now. And I want to share as many tools as I can that I have inside of me to help you along your podcasting journey. You know, it took nearly a decade for there to be 1 million podcasts. However, in the last few months, over 300,000 podcasts were launched. So let's just wrap our heads around that. A lot of people, of course, are at home because of the stay-at-home orders across the country. And they wanted to start a podcast, or in a lot of cases, they just wanted to fill their time. So they looked at different resources, different courses, bought up all the microphones on Amazon and launched that podcast. And here we are a few months later. And unfortunately, some of those podcasts have just faded into the background. So that's what this series is all about. And that's why I created it. So every week, we'll be talking about a different strategy that you can use to grow your podcast, depending on what your end goal is. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start at the beginning. But each week we'll talk about whether you want a career in podcasting. Do you want to create like an organization based on your podcast? There's so many different avenues that you can go down when it comes to leveraging podcasts. And that's what I want to share. And that's what this series is all about. If you've never met me, my name is Robin Kinney, and I am the president of Motor City Woman Studios and Audio Engineers of Detroit. We are a multimedia recording studio with locations in Southfield and a new location opening up in Midtown late 2020, early 2021. Don't quote me on that. But my whole cause and mission with Motor City Woman and Audio Engineers of Detroit is to empower more people to get started when it comes to creating media that reflects them. And also creating media that can speak to your communities and our communities. In so many cases, media is created by such a small amount of people. And in most cases, they don't represent the country at all. So that's what I love about podcasting, is that anyone can go on, hook up a microphone, attach it to an RSS feed, and share it with the world immediately. You don't have to worry about an algorithm. When it comes to social media, everyone who subscribes to your podcast is going to hear from you. So that's what I love, is that there's no type of filter. There's no type of overarching authority currently who can say, yes, your podcast is good, or no, your podcast isn't good. If you're speaking to your community, it's good, whatever that is. I've seen podcasts that are storytelling podcasts, interview-based podcasts, monologues. It runs the gamut. So don't think that you have to fit into a box. Create your own box and speak to your audience. And that's what we're going to be talking about in this series. How do I transform my podcast to do what I want it to do and really have a key component to where and what direction I want my podcast to go in. Okay. Now, this is something that I share with all of the clients who I interact with. And we have clients all across the country. We've been really grateful to connect with some awesome people and support some awesome podcasts over the years. When we started in 2015, we started as a digital radio station. And the whole premise of the radio station was to increase the number of women in broadcasting. So growing up in the city of Detroit, I listened to Martha Jean the Queen every day. And it wasn't because I turned it on, it's because it was on in my mother's red Ford Tempo every day. So I was forced to listen to it. But as I got older, I understood how powerful Martha Jean the Queen was. Not only was she a Black woman who hosted her own show solo, which was unheard of at the time, but she also owned the radio station. And ownership gives you power to share the information that you want to share, unfiltered. So I believe that stayed with me. So even though I began a career in the nonprofit sector, I always had a love of talk radio. And that led me to working with my partner and starting the digital radio station. And then over time, it has evolved to include podcast productions, audiobooks, voiceovers for commercials, for example. And now we're getting into the live streaming sector. So we're really excited about that. And with our new location in Detroit, we'll be able to produce music. So we're really excited about that. I say all of that because when podcasters start out, what I've seen is that they typically just start because someone told them, you don't need a lot. It's a low barrier to entry. Just get started. And I agree with all those things. However, you want to have the end goal, meaning what does success look like for you? A successful podcast may not equate to the number of downloads. It may equate to more sales. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're using your podcast to really identify yourself as an expert in a certain industry, you may be using your podcast to promote a book, to educate. I love seeing educational podcasts, podcasts that may talk about history. It may talk about a certain industry and the background, but begin with the end in mind, meaning sit down and really map out what is the goal of my podcast? What do I want to do with this podcast? What do I want this podcast to become? So the podcast can be step one, but maybe you use that podcast and then you sell like the intellectual property and it becomes a mini series on YouTube. Think big, okay? But I encourage anyone to sit down and really map out, what do I want this podcast to be? What do I want it to do? What type of impact I want it to make? I've seen social service and nonprofit organizations that have podcasts and they want to tell the story of why they're committed to their mission. So it may not be based on downloads. They really want to galvanize the community. Okay. So don't think you have to, your success has to be tied to downloads or revenue. Everyone's talking about monetization. There's other things on there that you can use and you can utilize to really leverage your podcast. So that's the first tip, is begin with the end in mind. Okay, so get organized. All right, so we're going to get into the nitty gritty here. So I'm going to take a sip. Okay. So this first part of the series, in our 4-part series, I have a podcast, Now What, is about planning and setting your podcast up for success. Now, with anything, you want to make sure that you are not overextending yourself. And if possible, your goal is to put as much energy as possible into the content, of course, into the podcast itself. But there's so many other elements of podcasting that new podcasters typically overlook or they just don't know. So in looking at this, when I say set up systems, batch record, tech tools, trademark, intellectual property, LLC or no. So as you can see, it's really bigger than just sitting down and pushing the record button. Recently, I've seen some podcasters, and these are large podcasts, and podcasts who they trademark their name. They may get a copyright. But these are all things to do if you are clear on what you want your podcast to be and to grow. Recently, there was a horror story of a very well-known podcast that was started by two people, and they were recording via this podcast platform, and that platform was sold to someone else. Okay. And so now the new people who owns their podcast are saying, no, this is our podcast. And the originators are saying, no, hey, we created that podcast, but they hadn't protected it. They didn't have a trademark. They didn't own the intellectual property. So it's sad to see things like that. But I think it's because podcasting is growing at such a rapid pace that we're all just trying to keep up with this new medium of trying to protect it now. It's like protecting an idea. That's the same thing that I want you to think about when it comes to your podcast. Okay, so when the organization part, some people do create an LLC for their podcast, and that's especially, again, this is if you're not an entrepreneur, so you don't already have an LLC. But this may come into play as you're thinking about sponsors and, and collaboration and where money is exchanged and setting up a bank account for the podcast. So you really, again, want to plan for success. So if your end goal is for your podcast to be another stream of income, and that is actually going to be one of our sessions of this 4-part series is like becoming like a professional podcaster, then you want to make sure that there's a separation between you, the individual, and the podcast itself. Okay. Setting up systems. I love systems. Okay. And as an entrepreneur, a mom of 3, I have to have systems for everything. There's a way to do everything. And that helps just so I don't get frustrated. I'm not all over the place. Things don't get lost, or worse, they don't get forgotten entirely. And systems are important, especially as you grow. So let's say, you're podcasting and you're starting your 2nd season. All of a sudden you get an email from a really big name who wants to be a guest on your podcast. Do you have the systems in place to support the marketing of this guest, making sure that you have where they can, book themselves on your calendar in an easy and efficient way? These are all systems that you can put in place beforehand, before you even get to that point. Again, it's all about planning for success. And I'm actually going to share some of my favorite systems and tech tools within this part 1, so that you can see what we use and what I recommend for a lot of our clients. Batch record. I love batch recording just because when you have time to do something, you might as well record like 3 or 4 episodes instead of 1 episode at a time. This is true because things happen, life happens, and you don't want to have 2 or 3 episodes out there and then your audience doesn't hear from you for another month. If you batch record, you can have everything scheduled, have your show notes all organized, and then you can just sit back and focus on the promo and working on future guests. Again, plan for success. That's what this is all about. Okay, so these are some of the tech tools I'm digging right now. These are the ones that are my go-to. I've worked with and used for years. Headliner app. Headliner app is for creating those audiograms. Audiograms are especially important for, let's say, Instagram, and you want to share an important quote that you said or a quote that your guest said on your show. You can use the Headliner app to create that audiogram. Descript is for if you need a transcription of your podcast. And what I'm seeing that's coming into play for consideration for podcasters is making sure that your podcast is accessible for everyone. So maybe someone is hard of hearing. Having a transcript can really, assist them. So make sure that you're able to have a broad audience and not just focus on people who can hear your podcast, but maybe people want to read it, maybe people want to view it. So you have your podcast on YouTube. I like Hootsuite. Hootsuite is for planning out social media posts. I'm not on social media all day. Some people are, but I am not. So Hootsuite really helps me to schedule posts on all the various platforms and push them out. So it may look like I'm engaged and it looks like we have the visibility, but I'm not actually sitting at a computer or with a phone in my hand all day, because who has time for that? I don't. Canva is great. If you're at the stage where you are not able to hire a graphic designer, no worries. You can utilize Canva to create graphics to use on those social media platforms. So just quick things like that. I do recommend people using a graphic designer to create your cover art, just because so many people are going to see it, and it really gives a credibility to your podcast as you grow to have a more polished cover art. And then Google Docs and Dropbox. So with podcasting, there's a lot of files going back and forth. You don't want to lose anything. You don't want to have a guest resend something because they emailed you and now you can't find the email. What I recommend to our clients is creating a Dropbox. And then when you have someone who's planning to be a guest on your show, send them the Dropbox link and they can upload their own stuff. They can upload their headshot. They can upload their bio. And then after you've interviewed them, you can send them via the Dropbox or Google Doc. You can send them the finished episode so that they have a copy of their episode. Okay. So I'm just going to pause here just to make sure we don't have any questions. I'm going to check YouTube here. Let's see. I think we are good so far. We are on schedule. Okay, I'm just going to keep checking for any questions and I'm going to keep going. We have a few more minutes to go. This is one of my favorite sayings. And I remember a high school friend's dad would say this to us all the time: proper preparation prevents poor performance. So in a lot of cases, it's not talent or ingenuity that leads to performance. It's being prepared in addition to those things. Prepare for success. Knowing that you want your podcast to be something or to do something or make a greater impact, you have to have systems in place. You have to make sure that, you have the credibility, that you have the consistency, and that you're interacting, with your listeners and you're interacting with potential subscribers. Okay. So we started with this first part because a couple months ago, we launched our Motor City Woman Planner for new podcasters. I launched this because I saw so many podcasters that were just all over the place. And I really wanted to create a planner specifically for podcasters. So it has templates in there and guides and just has space to jot down notes, keep up with guests. So really everything that you're going to need to stay on track. For more information about that, where you can order it, just visit motorcitywomanplanner.com. I have one. I encourage people to have one because it's really everything that I can think of that a podcaster is going to need to stay on track and to keep everything in one place. So you don't have all these legal paths all over the place and checklists all over the place. I put it all in one place for you. And now, if you're looking at this, but you're still not 100% sure on your podcast, maybe you just started and you still need some help. A few months ago, we launched our digital course, Podcast with Purpose, and it's more in detail. It includes videos, downloads, and everything you need to take your podcast from the idea stage, if you're at that stage where everything is in your head, to actually launching. And we've put everything into this course. It's on demand, so you could just go to our website actually and sign up. I'm going to put I'll put the direct link to the course in the chat as well once we get to the Q&A here. Now, so like I said, these are the things that are in the course. The videos are on demand, guides, worksheets, templates, call to action, because I know people who are just going to watch stuff, you really need homework. So like each video ends with, okay, this is what I want you to do to get ready for the next segment. So these are the different elements that are included into the course, everything from growing your audience to leveraging. So it starts from the beginning and takes you all the way to and beyond really launching your podcast. When you start talking about leveraging it and monetization strategies there. Okay, so this was our first one. Like I said at the beginning, we are going to continue with our Tuesdays at noon. Next Tuesday, join me for Run Your Podcast Like a Business. On the 15th, turn your podcast into a career. And then the 22nd is going to be Connect Your Podcast to Your Purpose. And that is all the information I have today. I'm going to stop here. And I am going to put into the chat here. There we go. I'm back. I'm going to put into the chat here a direct link so that you can see. Thank you so much, Lori. I will see you next week. I just put the link there so everyone can see it. I hope everyone have a terrific Tuesday. Enjoy the sunshine because I heard there's some rain coming, but even if there is rain coming, still enjoy it. So I'll see you next time. Bye.